You are listening to Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. Welcome to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show, a weekly radio program that spotlights positive real estate development and neighborhood revitalization throughout Philadelphia. I'm your host, Derek Hengamil. Jumpstart Philly is a unique community development program that trains, mentors, networks, and provides funding to aspiring real estate developers in 7 different Philadelphia neighborhoods, including Germantown, where the program was founded. Jumpstart believes that you can do well by doing good and focuses on removing neighborhood blight, scattered site rehab, creating a healthy mix of affordable and market rate housing, and avoiding gentrification through slow, steady growth and keeping wealth local. Interviews are conducted during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jumpinar series, held on Monday nights at 7 p.m. with a Zoom webinar. And for more information about these events, you can check the events page at jumpstartgermantown.com. This week, I'm speaking with Michael Kogut of INGT Lead Swipe to discuss the new lead safety requirements for all Philadelphia landlords and how you can receive your lead safe certification to comply with the new city rules. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and be sure to check out the podcast version of this program at jumpstartgermantown.com/media. Mike retired as a chief operating officer in February of this year to order and devote full-time to INGT Lead Swipe. And to date, he has conducted over 200 lead inspections, and Mike owns 4 investment properties and manages and maintains all the properties himself, including the renovations. He is a certified lead dust technician and is registered with the EPA, and he's here to talk to us about lead safety tonight. How you doing, Mike?
Great, Derek. Thanks, and thanks for having me, and hello, everyone.
Yeah, no problem. So tonight we're talking about lead safety and the requirements that the city imposed on landlords in Philadelphia. But before we get to that, I do want to just talk a little bit about your background and how you got involved in lead dust testing, and maybe you can just start wherever you want. What should we know about you?
Thanks, Derek. Well, I guess first and foremost, I am from the Philadelphia area, born and raised. I spent about 6 years in Texas. But my career has been in Fortune 500 companies up until February when I retired. But what led me into the lead business area was that I guess around December of last year, I went to renew my Philadelphia renter's license, and I was rejected for the first time in 10 years, 15 years. And the reason was I lacked a lead safe certificate. Mm-hmm. So lo and behold, like many of our audience, I was blindsided, and they may be too if they own properties in Philadelphia. It appears some landlords have received notifications, but others have not. So again, I was blindsided back in December, and I decided to do my due diligence into what is this all about. And upon my investigations, I said, wow, this is something I could do. So you have to go to school, you have to become EPA certified, and then you're eligible to do what's called these lead swipes. Mm-hmm. So I started just by chance that the city passed a new law. I happened to own a property, and I spent in excess of $200 to get an inspection done, and that piqued my curiosity.
Cool. So now your mission is kind of to make it easier for others, right?
100%. That's absolutely part of our mission, Derek, is just to make life easy for people.
Yeah, sure. So how did INGT Lead Swipe start then? Was that the company you started after receiving your EPA certification?
Yeah, actually, INGT started about 25 years ago with an investment in West Philadelphia. I came across a gentleman who worked for me. I didn't come across him. I reunited with a gentleman who worked for me prior, and he ended up moving into real estate. So I am strong in my faith. He happened to be strong in his faith. So we named the company INGT for In God We Trust.
Okay.
And because we went in blind, we just said, hey, we like real estate. We want to invest in properties and fix them up. And that was the first one years ago. And then, I needed a corporation to set up the lead business. And I just decided, for sake of ease, just do it under my existing INGT.
Yeah, great.
So that's how that all came about.
Yeah, sure. So how has the lead swipe inspections been going so far? Have you seen a lot of business? Has there been people taking you up on your service?
Absolutely. So what I've learned in my brief history, Derek, is there were many, many, many lead inspection companies in existence before the Philadelphia laws. Mm-hmm. So I kind of hit the ground a little bit disadvantaged while the existing companies didn't perform the Philly lead inspections, they did have long-term established relationships. So when the Philly lead business came along, or the lead requirement came along, I thought, wow, what a new opportunity. Everybody's going to be new. Everybody's going to use me. Well, it started off a little slow because lots and lots of people had existing relationships with big lead companies, right, that not only do what I do, but they do many, many things that I can't go. And one of them is called lead abatement. It's really big time, takes long, very expensive. But I found there's a lot of competition, Derek. However, I sense that a lot of these companies with the new Philly requirements became overwhelmed. Because a lot of my clients now are telling me, wow, you do them so fast. It takes other companies months. Right. And our goal is to, if you call me and say, Mike, I need a lead inspection, our goal is to schedule that within hours and complete it within 5 days. Right. And my business has grown, I think, as a result of our efficiency and speed, honestly. Yeah, sure. And continues to grow. Yeah, I'm sure everybody in the call knows how valuable speed is in the real estate development industry. It's everything is moving on a clock, so I imagine that certainly helped your chances out a lot. Absolutely. So you're right. I just wanted to ask you about your development experience because in your bio and as you're talking, it's clear that you redevelop properties yourself and you've had some experience there. Just what have you done and what are you involved in now in that sense? Thanks, Derek. Well, I'm lucky enough to have a business background. So I was a chief operating officer. So I'm lucky enough to have a solid business background, and all my construction experience, if you will, was just self-taught, over 40, 50 years. Well, I'm 58, so let's say over 40 years. Believe it or not, and I would recommend this to anybody. Now you have YouTube, which is so easy if you want to learn stuff with construction. But Home Depot sells this little orange book. It's a hardcover book. I think somebody gave it to me as a gift. I may have bought it, but I still have that thing. It's still out there, and I would encourage any listeners, if you're in Home Depot or even to go on, the internet, try to find this book. It's, again, YouTube is tremendous, but this, I find with YouTube, I have to focus on the screen. I have to watch the YouTube maybe 4, 5, 6 times. With the book, I could just take my time. It's so simple and so just logically laid out. That's how I got my start. So I went from there. How many properties have you developed? I sold 3 recently to move. So I developed the 4 I have and the 3. So a total of 7. Plus I have 2 of my own personal residencies that on both of those I've done additions. Right. So I have significant experience.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that's or that builds your trust with your clients, right? Because it always helps when the person helping you out knows the industry you're in and knows kind of what you're
Oh,
dealing with.
absolutely. And Derek, for me, I look at the labor rates that contractors charge, and forgive me if anybody is out there as a contractor, but they're almost sinful. Um, I did two bathrooms last winter, totally gutted them and redid them for under $5,000, both of them.
Wow.
And if you want to get a contractor, you're talking probably 10 to 15,000 each bathroom.
Right.
So, it's labor intensive. So I encourage your audience to learn some of the basics yourself.
Yeah.
Basic electric, basic plumbing, because when you have to use an outsider, it's significantly more expensive.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. So let's move back to lead, and I want to ask you just in general about lead safety. And I'm sure everybody has a general sense that lead is dangerous and it is a health hazard, and it's kind of why we're talking about this. But I just want to hear from you, as a lead inspector, and your experience in with your EPA certification and sort of the scientific background. Why is lead safety so important? Why is it not just something that we brush off like other things?
Thanks, Derek. Well, let me preface by saying the lead safety is kind of like the current COVID experience. You've got people who say masks are mandated. You have people that don't want to wear masks. You have Fauci himself, who was, made changes over time. But the bottom line is it's just not simply black and white. We do know lead is dangerous. To what extent, and why Philadelphia mandated, I'll give you as much background as I can. And I'm going to refer to my notes here, but so why it's critical. Lead can easily get into the body. And it gets into the body either through ingestion orally, water, kids chew paint chips, what have you, or they can be breathed in. So they're your two sources of getting into the body, is oral consumption or breathing in dusts. Now, what are the results, the dangerous results of lead? Well, it's focused mainly on children. Unless you absorb a significant amount of lead at one time, the impact and effects take years. Mm-hmm. So what science has found in children is lead has caused nervous system disorders, developmental delays, and behavioral problems. Mm-hmm. And more specifically, it impacts the brain, the nervous system, and causes organ damage. So that's the historical concern with lead. And of course, maybe, but that all stemmed from the usage of lead-based paint.
Right.
And, when lead-based paint was developed, it was phenomenal, I guess, for usage purposes, but the health impacts were unknown. And over time, it became evident that lead was a source of health issues. Now, in adults, the focus is more on the reproductive systems and pregnancies. That's where the focus is. But it's long-term, Derek, and there's some of the health reasons that have been documented and quoted.
Let me ask you this. Obviously people are probably very familiar with the idea that lead paint is dangerous. But what are some other things in your household that could have lead that you don't think about?
Well, lead paint is the primary factor. Second big one is lead piping. Apparently lead piping was used in lieu of copper. Now you have PVC. But you have lead paint and lead pipe are the basic sources, with the emphasis on the paint because of a lead pipe is pretty solid. If it does corrode over the years, chances of getting in the air are probably minimal. Whereas as paint deteriorates, it crumbles and it can lead to lead dust. Mm-hmm. And once you have lead dust, it's easily transmittable through not only the air in your house, but in larger buildings and large complexes. It gets into the air conditioning and the filtration systems. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest concern. When we went to school, for example, they've changed the example, but when I went, the gentleman held up a little sweet and low package. And he said, if this was full of lead dust and I poured it into the ventilation system of the Empire State Building, the entire building would become contaminated.
Wow.
My understanding now recently is the example they use, if they were to spread it over a football stadium during a football game, everyone would ingest some lead. Wow. Now, how true those facts are, Derek, I can't vouch.
Sure.
But that was what was taught in school in terms of why is this so critical?
Yeah, totally. And that makes sense in homes that are being turned over so fast, especially historic homes in Germantown. It's important to keep track of that and make sure people are monitoring it and it's being evaluated rather than just, forgotten about. And then, there's a line of people.
Now, more specific to Philadelphia, and thank you, because I learned this morning doing research in preparation here. But what the statistics show specific to Philadelphia is about 1/2 of the buildings built prior to 78. So 50% of anything built prior to 78 has significant and dangerous lead-based potential. Mm-hmm. For homes built between 1940 and 1959, there's a 70% risk. So it jumps up. The older the home, the higher the risk. And for homes built prior to 1940, it's likely that 87% of those are going to have some type of lead exposure. So what I learned further is that the city of Philadelphia in 2016 through 2018, they actually tested the blood levels in children. And what they found is they tested universally, but then when they got the results, they classified them by zip code. So what they ultimately did at the end of the study is said, here's the blood lead concentrations in Philadelphia children by zip code.
Right.
So with this new lead program, they're rolling it out by zip code over a 2.5-year period. And what I found, it's pretty cool. I didn't know there was any logic or rhyme or reason, but based on the study that was done, they put the highest zip codes, the highest concentration zip codes first.
Right.
So the levels, what they found is when they did this testing in children, the lowest zip code had a 1 to 3%. So 1 to 3% of the children tested had lead levels in their blood above what was, desired or deemed safe. So it went from 1 to 3, then it went from 3 to 5, then 5 to 8, and then the highest zip codes had levels of 9 to 15%. So those 9 to 15% ones are the first ones that are on the zip code list.
Right.
And I found that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me, the way they're tackling it. But so before, and we're going to talk about the lead safety requirements in a second, and you kind of teased what the city is doing on that end. But there was a terminology difference when I was reading about this. What's the difference between lead free and lead safe, or is there any difference?
Derek, thank you. And there is, and this is really close to COVID in terms of right, wrong, black, white, but let's start with lead free. Lead free, by terminology, means there's no lead whatsoever in the property. So somebody comes in, and this is where I'm hazy, and I tried to get answers, but I could not. But if you're lead free, somebody has come into your building, if you will, with credentials greater than mine and equipment a lot more expensive than mine. And they apparently have to go through every nook and cranny of the building. And when they're done, they will either designate you as lead free or not lead free. So, some of my clients are, they hold multiple units, and I've yet to find somebody who went through and has a lead free certification. And the only thing I can figure out is that it's time consuming and it's costly. Because for me, why do I want to do this every time I change a tenant or every 4 years when I could get it done in one time and be done with it? The closest I came, Derek, in my research without nailing it, is it appears to me it costs upwards of $3,000 or more for a lead free certification. That's all I know about. Gotcha. Now, lead safe just means somebody came into your facility and did a lead swipe. Now, this is what I do. We swipe windowsills and we swipe floors for lead dust particles. Whereas like lead free, they'll tell you you've got lead paint in this building. It could be 100% effective. It could be 100%. When I say effective, I mean it's not chipping. It's not deteriorating. Maybe it's been painted over 10 times by non-lead, but it exists.
Right.
The difference with lead safe is, hey, there could be lead in your building, but we're swiping for lead particles and lead dust free floating.
Right.
And it's not there.
Right.
So lead free, another big difference is lead free is permanent. Lead safe is a point in time. So what the premise is, and again, thank you, Dirk, because I learned a lot through my research. I could test you for lead dust today and be clean. But the next time you get a tenant in, this is the Philadelphia law, you have to do a retest. Reason being, lead dust can be generated through renovations, through accidents, fire, flood, what have you, anything that has to do with the physical nature of the building can generate lead dust emissions. So where do they come from? We talked about lead piping. We talked it could be in the filtration systems, but the primary source is the lead paint. Lead paint deteriorates, it chips. And, I guess, Derek, when it dissipates over long periods of time, it gets in the air, gets in the filtration system, gets in nooks and crannies, and disturbances draw it up.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a great explanation, and I like the way you put it. That lead free is permanent. That there's you won't have
no lead in the building, no lead pipes, no lead paints, no nothing.
Whereas lead safe is that moment in time, between now and the next time you do the test, you're good. I like that. That's a good, clear way to break that down. So that terminology, that lead free or lead safe, came from the city's new lead safety requirements. I want to ask you, could you just briefly describe what the requirement is?
Absolutely. And Derek, before I do that, you mentioned lead safe. I think lead safe is more a national
Okay.
initiative versus this lead safe is really Philly based. So
You mean lead
um,
free is lead free is national? Is that what you
lead
mean?
free is more national environmental protection, been around forever.
Right.
Whereas and where lead free, that I mean lead safe is Philadelphia based,
Gotcha.
at least in the short term.
Yeah.
If you go through, like, say you go through, I'm talking at the national level now.
Mhm.
If you have construction done on your building, which was built before 1978, no matter what it is, your vendor is supposed to have certifications to deal with lead. I had no idea of that requirement. So universally, you buy a building before that was built before 78, you want to do work on it, you hire a contractor. I don't know that anybody ever asked this, but they've got to have certifications to deal with lead. Now, again, if you don't ask, they don't tell. I just think we're operating quietly. So back to lead safe. Philadelphia, and all I could go back to was that study in 2016 through 18 that found blood lead levels in children. That's what prompted Philadelphia to say, hey, we want lead safe confirmation for these children living in rented residential units.
Gotcha. So what is the actual requirement that you need to have a lead safe certification prior to what?
So number one, if you operate legally as a Philadelphia landlord, you have to get a renter's license. So the first requirement is for every new license renewal, which is annually, Philadelphia now requires you to submit a lead safe certificate. So if you're like me, I was a residential property owner for rent for 15 years in Philadelphia. Every year I renewed my license, no issues until now. So a lot of the people listening, if you have Philadelphia rental licenses, the next time you go to renew, the city's going to flag you and say, where's your lead certificate? So that's requirement number one. You need one to renew your Philadelphia rental license. Requirement number two is, if say you lease a property, which I do, anytime you change tenants, you are required by Philadelphia, you are required to provide them, the new tenant, with a lead safe certificate. So if you had 5 turnovers during a year, you would, by Philadelphia standards, you would need 5 lead safe inspections.
Right. And this came into effect last October, right?
Absolutely. Yep. October of 20.
Yeah. And do you anticipate it just staying as the requirement for the uncertain future, or is it because it sounds like this is sort of a reaction to the, like you said, study that found all those levels. So is this gonna? Do you think, like, what do you see? I mean, I guess people should be concerned about the short term, obviously, but do you think it's going to stick around?
Well, it's a great question, and as a business owner and a new business owner, Derek, I've asked myself that question. Is my business just like a one-time windfall because this is new, or is this going to continue on and on? So the first thing is the rollout goes through next year, and I'll give you the exact date. It goes through September of 2022.
Okay.
So my belief is there's a ton of landlords out there that don't even know this is coming.
Right.
Because nobody sent me a letter in advance. Nothing.
If you're just tuning in, this is a conversation with Michael Kogut of INGT Lead Swipe. to discuss the new lead safety requirements for all Philadelphia landlords and how you can receive your lead safe certification to comply with the new city rules. Thank you for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM, and I hope you're enjoying the discussion.
So just if you could just describe the zip codes for me again. So is it one zip code at a time, or are all those zip codes subject to these requirements?
I'll actually. Can you see that, Derek? I know others can't, but
you might want to read it out. Just
yeah. So the first round included 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The first round included 11 zip codes, and they were supposed to be done by March of this year. Mm-hmm. But I'm still doing tons of inspections in those zip codes. So either people said, I'm not going to comply, I'm not going to do it. Who knows? I've had a ton of people tell me, I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. So what's the ramifications? Well, all I know for sure, you're not going to get your license renewed.
Right.
As for fines and penalties, I'm not certain, but I'm sure they could make your life miserable,
right,
if they wanted.
So
anyway, it's 4 rounds, Derek, of approximately 12 zip codes in every round. So the first round went from October 2020 to March 2021. The second round went from April 1st to September 30th of this year. The third round goes from October 1st of this year through March 31st of next year. And then the final round is April 1, 22 through September 2022. So to answer your question, I see another year and a half of bedlam, meaning people are going to get caught off guard.
Yeah.
And then after that, well, then every time tenants change, these are going to be required. So I believe it will be ongoing. I believe it'll be diminished. Mm-hmm. And then as for the licensure, it's going to have to be done every 4 years. So once you get a certificate for your first license renewal, you don't have to get another one for 4 years for license renewal purposes.
Right.
But in those 4 years, if you have 50 tenant changes, you're mm-hmm. supposed to get them for each tenant change.
Right. And based off what you were saying earlier about how expensive the remediation process is, and how expensive a lead-free inspection is, it's like people are going to be catching up for a while before they're able to like handle those costs, right? They're
exactly. And I think lead-free is the way to go unless, say, you own a building with 50 units. Mm-hmm. Then you do your cost-benefit analysis is, do I do lead-frees for the next X or do I... But the problem with a lead-free is if they go in and they find lead, you're not lead-free anymore and you just paid probably a significant amount of money.
Right.
So my gut tells me before you would do a lead-free, you want to be pretty certain it's lead-free.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're wasting your money.
Sure. All right. So we're running not short on time, but let's move on throughout our list here, and I do want to talk about the process, and maybe you can use your service as a guideline. Like when do you have to start the process of receiving your lead safe certification? Like how early on in the process, and then what happens after that?
So anybody out there that is a landlord, this process came into effect for them October of last year. Mm-hmm. Now, how the individual process works is either you get a notification from the city or you join a webinar such as this, mm-hmm. or somebody tells you or what have you. But first thing, if you learn that effective October, you have to do this. Mm-hmm. So from there, I guess you decide. Let me, Derek, read out
sure.
the the main point of contact for the city. This is important. Everybody should jot this one down.
I also just want to say, so Angie put the link to the Philadelphia or Phila.gov website where it had that chart you were looking at, Mike. So if the contact's on there, people can probably just use the link.
Okay, fair enough. But for the purposes of this little presentation, the official authority is the Philadelphia Lead and Healthy Homes Program. So once again, it's Lead and Healthy Homes Program, and they can be reached at lead.cert@philly.gov. So lead.cert@philly.gov. Thanks, Angie.
Cool.
And she's got it. So they're the official. You know, what I tell you, I think is all factual and correct, but they're the official.
Okay.
If you need information.
So let's say you just or you're coming up on a tenant turnover, or you're looking to renew your rental license. What do you do? Who should you talk to first, and what does that?
First thing is you're aware of the need. Now you got to find a vendor. Mm-hmm. So at one point, Philadelphia, I believe, had a list of vendors out there, but I tried to get on it, and I was told that they now moved that list. They gave the list to the Environmental Protection Agency. Mm-hmm. So now if you want to find a vendor, my understanding is to get the list, you have to go to the EPA website, or, of course, call INGT Lead Swipe, but regardless.
Yeah, sure. So, and I just want to say, I also put that link in the chat. So anybody on the website,
you call your vendor, and you know, I can only speak for the way I work. I can tell you, I'm told other vendors are overwhelmed. I guess they took off on more business than they could handle. They're months behind, and I'm hearing lots of errors on the certificates, like putting the wrong zip codes, the wrong addresses, just things that would happen if you're overwhelmed as a business person. But anyway, you call up your vendor. If you're an individual, so I have two clients. I have individual landlords that might own one unit, and I have property managers that manage 300 units. Mm-hmm. So if you're an individual landlord, let's start there. You call your vendor, say, I need a lead inspection. No, my answer is, I'm available, I'll do it. What works for you? And most people say, well, let me get a hold of my tenant. Or they give me the tenant's information, and I call and arrange. So as an individual landlord, first thing you do is pick a date. If the unit's vacant, you as the landlord can set up the date yourself. If the unit's rented, you probably have to coordinate with your tenant, or have me, the vendor, coordinate with your tenant. So first step is scheduling. Make sure there's access to the property, because whether it's me or not me, I incur costs to go out. So if I go out there and knock on a door and nobody answers, you know, that's been scheduled. I have to charge. So I don't charge for the full inspection. I do believe some vendors do. But so tidbit of advice for the landlords out there: when you're talking to your tenants, hey, Mr. or Miss Tenant, if this goes off as planned, fine. But if you don't answer the door or this or that, you have to pay the inspection charge for the visit. And I'll typically charge either 50 or 75, depending upon the circumstances.
Okay. So let's move on and say that inspection happens. You show up at the door and you're good. What does the inspection look like? How long does it take?
First of all, we show up at the door. We put on our protective equipment. We have masks, we have gloves, and we have booties. So by Philadelphia standards, we are required to swipe, and I'll explain swipe. We're required to swipe every bedroom and one common area. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, we have to swipe every bedroom. We swipe a windowsill, not just one windowsill, and one floor sample in each bedroom. Then we go to the common area. That could be kitchen, could be living room, could be dining room. We swipe one windowsill and one floor in that area. Now, what is a swipe? So we go into the bedroom. Let's say we start with a bedroom. We have special swipes, special little cloths that come in a sealed envelope. So we'll go in. First thing I do, I have a large envelope, and I'll mark that with the address, 123 C Street. So that represents the building. Then I might go to the back bedroom. So then I'll have another little sample container that'll be called back bedroom. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go swipe the windowsill, and I'll fold the swipe up, and I'll put it in a baggie, and I'll call that back bedroom sill. Then I'll swipe the floor, and I'll put the swipe in a little baggie. It's just a cloth, and I'll call that back bedroom floor. Then I'll go to bedroom number 2 and say that's the front bedroom. Swipe the windowsill, put it in a little baggie, and call that front bedroom sill. Then front bedroom floor. So bottom line is, if I leave a 3-bedroom unit, I'm taking 2 samples in every bedroom, so that's 6 total. Then I do a kitchen or a living room, that's 2 more. So for a 3-bedroom, I would be taking 2, 4, 8 samples, and then I have to include a blank. Just open up an envelope, don't swipe anything, put it in a baggie, and make up a fictitious name, because that's used for testing purposes. The city doesn't want the lab to know which is a blank. Mm-hmm. So as far as the lab is concerned, they'll receive an envelope with all these samples, and they test them for lead percentages. Mm-hmm. So the results come back. If they pass, then I go and I generate a lead-safe certificate. Mm-hmm. So if it was you, Derek, it would have the property address, the zip code, it would have my company name, my certification number, the date of service, and then at the very bottom is a block that for your tenant to sign. Basically says, I, tenant, was given a lead safe certificate on this date. But so when I leave, so I show up at your door, takes maybe 15 to 20 minutes for me to get through each bedroom, do the swipes. I leave with a nice, neat package. I come home, then I have to get on my computer and I have to fill out a lab form. So when I fill out the lab form, I say, I did this address. I did bedrooms 1, 2, 3, living room. And then I have a blank, which is, I might call kitchen window, mm-hmm. but I don't call it blank. So I package them all up. I send them to the lab via Federal Express with 3-day delivery. I could do it overnight, but the cost gets so expensive. So I found three-day delivery to the lab is the most beneficial for you, who has to pay the bill. Like overnight delivery, for example, is $40 mm-hmm. versus 3-day is anywhere from like 10 to 12.
Sure.
So it saves you money. And, so did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, you, I think you said that, or the example you were saying was that it was a negative sample. There was no dust found or whatever. What happens if there's
bedroom clean, right?
Yeah. Well,
If a sample comes back out of range, I never say fail. And for your audience out there, I recommend you not use the terminology either. Only reason being, we're in such a litigious society, meaning people sue left and right. We first of all, my professional relationship is with you, the property owner or the landlord. Mm-hmm. So I am not allowed to tell your tenants anything. Mm-hmm. Pass, fail, nothing. That's up to you. My off the record advice is if a sample comes back and it was exceeded the acceptable limits, mm-hmm. then that sample has to be retested. So if I go in and I do 9 samples in your place, one of them exceeds limits, it has to be retested. Not the whole unit, just the one sample. Okay. So we'll inform the landlord. We'll ask that they remediate the situation. So number one, if I go in and it's a chipped, deteriorated sill, we are not allowed to test it. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I would go out and I'd say, Derek, I'll take a picture of it. I'll say, Derek, the sill is deteriorated. I'm not allowed to test it. Mm-hmm. So whether I say that or whether I test it and it exceeds limits, then you as a landlord have to address it. And it's simply addressed by a good sanding, a good repainting. Mm-hmm. That's what we recommend. Then we'll go back in and we'll do the same swipe just with the one sample. So if that comes back clean, then at the end of the day, I send you your certificate. I send you the original results, which would show, and again, I don't want to use the F word, which shows out of compliance. Then I'll send you the results of the retest. Sure. So you, in a exceeds limit, you'll get 1 certificate and 2 test results, possibly 3. I've never had to go back 3 times.
Great. So just quickly here, because we're running out of time. What about after you receive that certification? How do you prove to the city that you have it? Is there a submission process? I think
horrible, ugly submission process. As I say horrible, ugly because, I received my results in the certificate. And I thought, cool, I'll go to the city system, which is called Eclipse. And I figured I'll upload what I have and be done with it. Unbeknownst to me, though, you have to key in the individual results. So it's not good enough you give the city the results, they can read them. You have to key in the results. It's a real pain in the rear end and unnecessary, but in my mind, unnecessary, but absolutely necessary by the city. Now, I'm not trying to market, but it's a big pain in the butt. I found a guy that'll do the data entry for $10.
Okay.
So, if you're a landlord with 5 properties, it gets burdensome to key in for 5, but this guy will do it for $10. Okay. Then once it's in, once you upload and enter the data, the city will come back to you basically saying you've been cleared for your license.
And that concludes my conversation with Michael Kogut of INGT Lead Swipe about the new lead safety requirements for all Philadelphia landlords and how you can receive your lead safe certification to comply with the new city rules. The interviews on this program are recorded during Jumpstart Germantown's weekly Jump in Our series, which takes place via Zoom webinar every Monday night at 7 p.m. And if you'd like to participate in the live Q&A with our guest, be sure to head to jumpstartgermantown.com/events and register for next week's Jump in Our. If you're interested in starting a Jumpstart program in your own community, be sure to visit gojumpstart.org and see our how-to guide and open source training workbook. Thank you so much for listening to the Jumpstart Philly Real Estate Radio Show on Germantown Community Radio, WRGU 92.9 FM. and be sure to tune in next week.